Our reality is that American kids and teens live with the fear of coming under attack in their classrooms. This fear is a uniquely American part of childhood. No child should ever worry about going to school. Each year, there are dozens of gun-related incidents in schools that result in trauma, injuries, and deaths. Roughly 5% of kids under the age of 18 have witnessed a shooting. And while we don't know the intent behind every shooting, past research shows 2/3 of guns used in school shootings actually come from the home of the shooter or their relative. Children are growing up in an age where more and more schools are conducting drills to prepare for these types of shootings. Over 2/3 of schools have had school shooter drills in 2016. We should refuse to accept this as a new normal. Unintentional shootings, most of which happen in the home, affect kids and teens at surprisingly high rates. 76% of kids ages 5 to 14 know where firearms are kept, which is a huge problem considering more than 1.7 million kids live in homes where guns are unlocked and loaded. So the truth is, while high-profile mass shootings are in the media quite often, hundreds of shootings happen every week that don't get enough media attention. About 60% of gun deaths are suicides, and roughly 85% of suicide attempts with a gun are fatal. 35% of gun deaths are homicides. The other 5% are unintentional shootings or those killed by law enforcement.
Domestic violence gun deaths continue to plague our nation. In 2017, over 500 women were killed at the hands of a domestic abuser who was using a gun. Every 16 hours, a woman is also shot and killed by a current or former partner.
So courts are given the job of interpreting the Constitution, and that includes the Second Amendment. In a really influential case, the Supreme Court decided that the Second Amendment means that a responsible, law-abiding citizen can keep a handgun at home. But what it hasn't done is that it hasn't said whether that right extends to assault weapons or whether people have the right under the Second Amendment to carry a gun in public. Some states have passed bans on assault weapons, and those bans have been upheld by the courts.
In 1994, the Brady Bill was enacted, and under that law, it made it so that everyone purchasing a gun from a licensed gun dealer had to go through what we call a background check. Under the Brady law, more than 3 million dangerous sales have been stopped.
Well, unfortunately, background checks only apply to sales by licensed gun dealers. They don't cover private sales that are made online, at gun shows, or between two individual people. So that means that 1 out of every 5 guns today is sold without a background check. A huge hole in the system. That means that someone who is barred from having guns can buy a gun from a private seller with no background check at all and no record of the sale. We must immediately pass laws to make sure there's a background check on every gun sale, every single time. Almost 20 states have passed state laws expanding background checks beyond what federal law requires. So about 50% of Americans live in states with expanded background checks.
Anyone who's in the business of selling guns must have a gun dealer's license. Those licenses are regulated by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. There are tens of thousands of these dealers, actually more dealers than McDonald's and Starbucks combined.
While these gun dealers are federally regulated, a lack of resources makes it really hard to crack down on the gun dealers that aren't following the rules. In fact, about 90% of guns recovered from crimes are traced back to only about 5% of gun dealers nationwide.
Well, there used to be a federal law banning assault weapons. That law expired in 2004. So now, under federal law, assault weapons, high-capacity magazines, those are legal. Under state law, 7 states and DC prohibit purchase of the assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. In shootings where assault weapons or high-capacity magazines are used, 155% more people are shot and 47% more people are killed.
Time and time again, we see shooters' behavior escalate, and we know that there's a way to prevent more violence by limiting access to guns for those that are in periods of crisis. A few states actually already have these laws in place, and Florida, in the wake of Parkland, just enacted one. Although the state laws vary, they typically let family members or a law enforcement officer go to the court and they ask a judge to temporarily remove a gun when someone is in a period of crisis. And then that person has a right to also be heard by the judge. If the judge decides to issue an order to remove the guns, it typically lasts for a couple of weeks.
Thank you so much for getting involved. It is truly going to be our generation that's going to make a difference.